full topical picture. The entry level of NAD precursors is probably niacinamide, 4 to 5% is the lower threshold of effects. We are not big fans of niacinamide. We just want to say that. So niacinamide basically is the kind of a waste material in the NAD usage kind of life cycle. And the problem is that if we're going to add more and more niacinamide, we're basically adding more homework for the body as far as what the body needs to create NAD out of. And that's it's a long process. So it's a process that takes a while for the body to do that. Welcome to another episode of Biohacking Beauty, the topical arm of longevity skincare. Brought to you. First of all, my name is Amitai Eshel. This is
Anastasia Khodzhaeva.
And we are the co-founders of Young
Goose.
The world's first longevity,
Skincare.
biohacking,
Biostacking.
stacko buying, etc. And this podcast is brought to you by Young Goose.
Only Young Goose.
Only Young Goose. We don't have any sponsors. If you want to sponsor us,
we don't take any sponsors.
Sorry. Anyway, Anastasia.
Yes. Hi.
This episode, what hi? We've been together all day. This episode is going to be the second episode in the deep dive. Should I say a submarine type dive? What does it do? It dives or it just sinks? Actively sinks.
Yeah, this is part 2
of an active sink into
NAD+.
NAD+ and skin health. And dare I say the more interesting part.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Topical
I don't know, we didn't
applications.
start talking yet.
No, but yeah, I get interesting as it goes. Anyway, so this is second part. Before we dive in, we sink in.
Before we're
gonna
read the submarine,
we are going to read a review. Anastasia is going to read a review.
Actually, no, Amitai is going to read it.
No.
I'm not sure I know how to pronounce the last name.
It's called Sarah Robuchon.
I knew you're going to do this accent much better than I would.
Robuchon. French name. Anyway, new community. I recently entered the world of biohacking with no idea about where to start. I also live here in an area where there are not many open-minded people. I Googled top-rated biohacking podcasts and thankfully stumbled upon Biohacking Beauty. Not only has this couple inspired me to invest in my body, but also in its longevity on a cellular level. I listen to episode after episode and learn new skills to add to my biohack stacking, as you like to call it. Okay. I also don't feel so alone in this journey and am happy to have found my community of like-minded learners and people who want to make the most of the body they have. I also just ordered my first Young Goose product and cannot wait to try it. Thank you again, Biohacking Beauty. Again, Sarah Robuchon. And here's the beautiful thing, Sarah. You only ordered one product. Well, guess what? You're now getting another one because every review that we read, we're sending a free product. So how do you get this product? I know you found us through Googling, but go to Instagram, type in young_goose_skincare and DM us and say, hey, you read my review? Here are my details. Shipping details, and give us the username that we read, and you're going to get free product shipped to you. You could also, if you're not an Instagram person, you can email this to service@younggoose.com, and a new product is going to be on the way. And by the way, she said something interesting because we talk about it once in a while, but that's how we felt when we went to our first biohacking conference, right?
Yes. I mean, the best thing that ever happened to us, both I
met you, we have a son together.
And as a company, is meeting our community. And yes, and that really shaped the journey for us. And the products we've been formulating while staying in a, constant conversation with the community. So I think that also is why
we've been multitasking, formulating and conversing at the same time.
Yeah, but also I think that's why the growth of the brand continues to be a lot of word by mouth.
Yeah. Anyway, listen, we have a lot to go through. NAD by plus.
Word by word, mouth by mouth.
Word, exactly. So, where we left off is how do we then, so we covered what goes in our body. Now, let's talk about what goes.
Yeah, the part one, we covered basically all the science behind NAD plus and why you should know about it and why you should care about it.
Yes. So now we're going to talk about what goes on our skin, which is a completely different delivery challenge. So, Anastasia, what does the clinical data actually say about topical NAD precursors?
Okay. So the strongest evidence is for niacinamide. A 2005 Journal of Cosmetic Dermatology study showed that they tested 5% niacinamide on 50 women ages 40 to 60 over 12 weeks. And here's what they found. They found significant reductions in fine lines, dark spots, roughness. They saw improved elasticity. But here's the critical detail. They also tested a 2% arm, and it failed to reach statistical significance on most endpoints. So what does this tell you?
It tells me that they should have tested the face. No, I'm kidding. When they say arm, it means like another arm of the study. That's a joke for the nerds. So there is a hard threshold. I have a few things to say about that. I think if we just silo this discussion, below 4 or 5% or 4 to 5%, which is kind of hard to have multiple ingredients in those percentage points in a skincare formulation. You're basically wasting money for the most part. But most people watching have a niacinamide product, probably, that's underdosed. So they don't even know that. I would check. I would have people check their labels tonight and see what they can infer. Normally, if it's not like top 5 ingredients or 6 ingredients, it's probably lower than that. The second thing is, and I don't think that's the podcast to get into it. I think we've gotten into it before, but it's a really not great precursor. It has a lot of if you're trying to raise your NAD levels through niacinamide, you're doing it basically through a pathway that you're doing it in a very roundabout way, and that requires a lot of that creates a lot of debris or waste in the cells when you're doing it. Anyway, check your labels tonight. I'm interesting how many people have underdosed products.
But also, I think here is the critical point that we were now talking about the effects of niacinamide in the skincare formulation, but a lot of the times it's not necessarily those improvements not necessarily came just because of the it boosting NAD plus. So I think the majority of the people, when they think of niacinamide, they just think of it as a brightening agent, and that's why they're buying niacinamide-rich skincare, not to boost their NAD plus. So I think this is a distinction to make. But because there is couple skincare companies that they do promote as their main theme boosting NAD plus, and they do indeed have niacinamide as the only ingredient that does that. Well, in that case, stay tuned. We're about to tell you why there are other precursors that do it much better.
Yeah. To your point, getting real NAD precursors or NAD into the skin, that is what excites us about the cutting edge science out there, formulation.
Okay, should I talk about those precursors and why it could be a challenge?
First of all, yeah, exactly.
So one of the most prominent precursors, and if you really didn't listen part one, you should listen part one first, just so we don't repeat a lot of the same information. But we talked a lot about NMN. And so NMN is 334 daltons, and it's water soluble, so it doesn't cross the lipid-rich stratum corneum, skin barrier easily. However, in 2024, there was a study that tested something clever, applying NAD+ alongside quercetin and anaxolone.
NAD+ precursors, NMN mainly. In that study,
Yes. So I said NAD+, but it wasn't like the full molecule. It was broken down to its precursors. Thank you. And the anaxolone, if you were wondering what this is, it's a molecule that inhibits CD38, and CD38 would chews up your NAD+. So everything is here focused on raising NAD+. So the idea is to block the enzyme that would immediately destroy the NAD+ on its arrival. In fibroblast cultures, so it was done in vitro, intracellular NAD+ rose significantly more than with NAD+ alone. So go ahead.
So that's the approach that I think really clicks for me when we are formulating the youth line of products. So, the origin story, we had an NAD precursor product, was called Care. And we really double down on the logic of usage of NAD, or the prevention of the breakdown of NAD close to absorption, whether it's in molecules like spermidine, which uses the added NAD to stimulate autophagy, or copper peptides, or resveratrol, fermented resveratrol, or ergothioneine are molecules that really use that, which are basically fueling other longevity pathways. So the main thing that I think is important to understand in skincare as a whole, because we are seeing a lot of NAD skincare coming to market, and more is coming. So honorable mentions are like Goop and Obagi. What are you guys doing with our molecule? No, I'm kidding. But we're going to see so many other companies coming with this to market. There is a huge celebrity, probably the biggest celebrity, that about a year ago we got reached out to design skincare for them based on NAD. So which we said no. But it's coming. The question is, NAD alone, and that's something important to understand, maybe we're going to expand on it later, it does very little. It actually is more potential energy than energy that your body acts on naturally. So it is important to top off that fuel, but you need the gas pedal, you need the engine, you need everything else to use that fuel and not stay in fantasy land, or like just that alone.
Yeah.
Upgrade your, other ingredients that upgrade your engine or whatever. So let's talk about delivery technology.
Yes.
A little bit, because it's not only, as I said, we need to use it, etc., but it's also, you mentioned it's a water soluble molecule. And a lot of the times we're hearing, it's this big or it's this small, meaning it doesn't penetrate through the skin. The stratum corneum, it's not a barrier, it's a selective barrier. Meaning, yes, it's easier to trick it and have very small molecules that would penetrate even though it's trying to stop them. But it doesn't necessarily try to stop all the molecules. Water soluble, very difficult to get through. But let's talk about delivery technologies that allow actually molecules to go through.
Sure. So liposomal encapsulation is the most common and the most promising delivery technology in skincare. So in our case, the NMN precursors, they're wrapped in the lipid bilayer that fuses with cell membranes. So also solid lipid nanoparticles and transferosomes with deformable bilayers. So the goal really is bypassing the stratum corneum to deliver the intact precursors to viable cells. And as you mentioned, the NAD precursor, they need the whole support system, and we're getting, we talked a lot about where the conversion of precursors into the NAD plus molecule happens, and then how it's being utilized in part 1. But just to jot everyone's memory, most of the important processes ends up happening in mitochondria, and that's why in our complex, we have a whole mitochondrial support complex, and I don't know if we're going to be talking more about this today or not, but that's also something that we really, devoted a really long time to in R&D. And, mitochondrial skincare with focus on the mitochondrial health also is becoming another trend.
Yeah.
But if you want, it doesn't have to be two separate trends. It actually has to be not two separate trends for you to get the most out of it. That's, I guess, what I was getting at.
I love it. Since we are, we do need to stay within the allotted time. I'll leave it at that. You're correct. What we see are basic. I'm going to touch on another trend in a second, but we see the NAD trend. We see the mitophagy trend, which is recycling of mitochondria, and because everyone wants to say longevity science, but explaining longevity science is much for the few rather than the many. The many, they want to, they replace in their head the word anti-aging with the word longevity, and they move on. However, these are 2 of the 5 pathways, mitochondrial pathways, that we care about for, how your skin looks at the end of the day or your body functions. So mitophagy, you remove, old mitochondria so they can be replaced with new ones. NAD is topping off the raw fuel that your mitochondria needs to function. But we did mention, for example, resveratrol, or we mentioned organothionine, or we mentioned autophagy, spermidine. So all of those play on the different pathways of the mitochondria, and really, as I said, actually, it's you that said it. Like, one pathway is a start,
and 5 is what your skin needs.
You see,
for
I
support.
told you that this is what you said. It's not me. Anyway, another trend is senescent cells and senolytic anti-senescent skincare. We did talk about it in the last episode. We talked about how senescent cells drive CD38, which destroys NAD. There is something to say about that. There's a way to attack that from topical side as well. There are peptides that do it. Some are patented, some are not. There are prescription drugs that do it. But I think I had a meeting with probably the foremost peptide researcher in the world.
I know you were super excited about this conversation.
Still am.
Yeah.
Trying to find out a way to work together. Shout out to Professor Pinchas Cohen. And we talked about senescent cells, and it's funny. I called it the next telomeres, because telomeres, shorter or longer telomeres, are not a longevity strategy. It's a longevity marker. If you're treating your body right, you're going to have longer telomeres. And the same thing goes for senescent cells. Reduction of senescent cells as a therapeutic is not, in and on its own, it's not going to make you live longer. Or it has a very, very specific cap on living longer. And the bigger the organism, the less effective that is. And by the way, research show that mice that don't have the ability to get cells into senescence, they die extremely early. Senescence is a marker of how you treat your body, like telomeres. We want less senescent cells because our entire system works better. We don't target senescent cells necessarily to get the best results. and I think a prime example of it, after I mentioned all of those senolytics, is, for example, exosomes, especially platelet-derived exosomes like we use, like other, there's one more company who uses it. But that has been shown. So 2024, I think it was a study that I'm referring to, has been shown to reduce senescent cells by 40%, but that's due to better cellular function, right?
Yeah.
So shout out to Vampire Exosome, which is a product that we created, or there's one more company in the market. And the data, as I said, is pretty cool, pretty striking, no?
Yeah, and I think when it comes to exosomes, we're not going to talk too much on that. There are a lot of exosome companies. We did a couple deep dives of like why we choose platelet-derived exosomes. You can listen to that. But what excites me is the fact that we still stayed true to ourselves, and we paired it with boosting NAD plus in that serum. So it's not only the source of exosomes, yes, that matters, but also the whole formulation and how we support that signaling that exosome, stimulate.
So for the full topical picture, the entry level of NAD precursors is probably niacinamide, 4 to 5%, is the lower threshold of effects. We are not big fans of niacinamide. We just want to say that. We've developed something called NAD Apex, which targets NAD boosting in a few different dimensions, like 3 dimensions. And anything from the precursors to improving how your body restores NAD. Antioxidants reduce oxidative damage that drains NAD. And if we want to address cellular signaling and health in a way that reduces senescent cells, then exosomes, or specifically platelet-derived exosomes, is where it's at, if you would. But let's talk a little bit, let's change directions a little bit. Let's talk about lifestyle strategies to boost NAD.
Okay. So I think we can start by talking about fasting. Do you agree?
It's up to you. You are the boss.
Well, I will tell you, once I traveled to Europe for 3 weeks, I came back and I had a new body. And I found all of the cups and bowls that we had in the house were used for coffee. And they were still all in the sink, by the way. Yeah. 3 weeks worth of coffee-stained cups and bowls. But yeah, he was fasting. Fasting. Actually, I got really, really nervous. And at the time, I was in school and I wrote a paper on fasting, intermittent fasting, because I wanted to, it was a meta-analysis. It was one of my senior projects inspired by Mitai. And already back then, funny enough, that was almost 10 years ago, the data was available that it's amazing for boosting your NAD+, and I'm going to get into it right now, and for your muscle building. But it actually was, at the time, already questionable for women's hormonal cycles. So just a fun anecdote there.
Yeah.
So when you compress your eating window, you activate AMPK, which phosphorylates and stabilizes NAMPT.
Another mitochondrial pathway, by the way, one of the ones we spoke about before.
Exactly. Again, if you don't know what is AMPK and AMPT, refer to the notes from the part 1. And then, so these are, all of these steps that really help to stimulate NAD+ synthesis. So animal studies show 30 to 50% increases in NAMPT protein levels with caloric restrictions. 30 to 50% more NAD+ production from skipping breakfast alone. And then, Namita, you want to, share how you adapted to...
First, I think skipping breakfast, I mean, I think it's by now, I think there's more nuance.
Yes, and again, I mean, I do not recommend skipping breakfast. For women, everything is really questionable because you want to have. If you skip breakfast, make sure you also skip your coffee or your caffeine intake.
And I think, women are more sensitive to that because there is a more reliance on cortisol, cortisol movement spike in the morning and movement throughout the day in order to regulate hormonal regulation. So there's something to say about that. We do 16/8 for the most part.
I don't really.
Not really. I think you do like 14. Fasted 14 hours, something like that. But I do have an anecdote for you. Do you know why? I think you do, but do you know why? Classically, the classic fasting is 16/8.
I wrote a paper on it, but now I don't.
Why? What's the now? Why did they even choose 16/8? Why didn't they do 15.5, 8.5? Or
the shift of the employees. I remember it now. Yeah,
it's not first of all they were the grad students in Sitchin Panda's lab, and I mean, you can tell it if you want, but they it's not about the shift. It's about how long their girlfriends allowed them to be in the lab. So the girlfriends of those grad students were like, "You're not going to stay in the lab for more than 8 hours." So they're like, "Okay, I guess we're feeding them for 8 hours." So that's why I'm just saying it's a little bit random. You definitely want to listen to your body. You definitely want to run different tests, see how your body responds. If it's anything from Eli, which is the cortisol, they have some other ones, but like saliva test to see how your cortisol responds. Obviously, you can test your NAD levels, so see if it affects you, how it affects you. I think all of that is important, but I think it's a pretty simple biohack with a big payoff to find a way to limit the hours in which the feeding window, as you would.
I will say though that you recommend people to experiment with their bodies and see what works for them, but you also can refer to a lot of literature that exists on fasting. And my personal favorite book on this, which was published years, like 7 years later after I wrote the paper, and my university paper is Fast Like a Girl by Dr. Mindy Pelz. There you have all the research you need about fasting. You have so many different ways to do fasting. It could, be up to 72 hours for some people. I'm not saying I've never done that, but it could be. And she walks you to how this would be done for females properly.
Yes. Okay. So.
But the data is phenomenal.
Okay.
Exercise. You want to talk about exercise?
How did you know?
Fast and exercise. They're all. We have our notes. We have our notes.
Let's talk about exercise.
Yes. So from our research before this podcast, we saw that a 2012 Cell Metabolism paper by Kent Tow showed that AMPK activation from exercise directly upregulates NAD.
Made them sound a little Japanese.
Transcription.
Kanto.
Listen, there's so much research happening in Japan. I think I have a good chance of making everyone Japanese, and then I'll hit like 50% of the time. So again, exercise for boosting NAD+. Try HIIT sessions. Supposedly, according to research, a single HIIT session boosts muscle NAD+ by 20 to 30% within hours after the exercise. And here's the compounding part. Chronic training maintains elevated basal and AMPT, so your NAD+ production is permanently higher even on rest days. So if you considered HIIT exercise or tried and you didn't love it, but you're like, I need more convincing, maybe the fact that it boosts your NAD+ naturally will convince you to give it another go.
So in other words, like one workout gives you a spike, but consistently you get like a permanent upgrade, if you would, which is very difficult to do with a pill. I mean, we're being sold a lot of like supplements again, around mitochondrial function, things like that. This is something very difficult to get, even with like a very strong peptide that engages in AMPK upregulation, something like 5-amino-1-MQ. Which you can buy in pill forms, by the way. It's very difficult to do what exercise does. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Now, sleep.
Yeah.
But I don't mean that you should sleep. First of all, you should sleep. We have a 2-year-old. Sleep is always good. But this one really blows my mind when I look at it. Because, when you explained to me the kind of circadian rhythm, skin connection, it really resonated with a lot of what we were doing. And that's something I repeat a lot. And then I tell you, have you heard about this and that? You're like, hey, I was the one who told you this. But let's talk a little bit about sleep and NAD.
Okay. So not surprisingly, NAD Plus oscillates the 24-hour cycle. So Nagahata, probably Japanese, showed in 2009 Cell paper that CERT1 uses this oscillation to regulate clock and BMAL1. So basically, translation. So we talked a lot about sirtuin genes, and they're the genes that turn on all the repair processes. They need NAD plus to function, and so you need to have more NAD plus to kind of activate them. So now we're talking about the fact that sleep has certain waves of NAD plus production. And like I think 2-3 episodes ago, we released the episode about sleep as a guide to like better sleep for your skin, and then we talked a little bit more in depth of those different windows. But yes, there are certain windows of NAD plus production that peak at night. So you really want to be asleep for that window, so you get the most NAD plus produced. And unfortunately, if you're awake during that window, then you won't get the same NAD plus production spike.
And you're saying, in other words, that since NAD is kind of a master regulator of that biological clock that we all have, which every cell has almost individually. It's controlled by the body, but through temperature and things like that. But every cell has their own kind of clock. And NAD is one of those master regulators of that clock, of that the clock that every cell has. And a depleted NAD cell really has a problem managing well its circadian rhythm, its clock. And another research that you showed me in preparation to this episode, which showed that there is a difference of almost 8-fold difference between different times, depending on where you are on the circadian rhythm, how your cells divide, almost 8-fold as far as time. So 8 times more active at night than they are in the day, as far as like renewing themselves.
Yeah.
That's why a lot of the times when we design AM and PM routines, we're saying, hey, the AM, you really want to protect your skin. You want to make sure there's not a lot of damage happening. Do you want to use the longevity molecules? Definitely. Because as we said in the previous episode, after one UV, serious UV exposure event, you have 90% less NAD in your cells, in your skin cells. You definitely want to protect that, right?
Yeah.
But if you want to use longevity molecules like NAD, or mainly NAD, to fuel repair, you want to use it at night, because that's when all of these things happen. It's an 8-fold more renewal happens at night. So when someone, listening to it, when you're doom scrolling at night, like in midnight, or sleeping inconsistently, you're not just tired. You're not just your brain is not the only thing that's tired. You're shutting down the window when your skin does the heaviest renewal. I think that, to me at least, is a different. It's a reframe on sleep.
Yeah, it's not just your rest. It's NAD plus dependent repair session, the sleep itself. So that's why we talked a lot about going to sleep at consistent times. And there are also, some people believe that they're like night owls. And unfortunately, you might believe it, or you're most productive at night. And, there are different careers. Like I would assume a lot of, I don't know, musicians record at night or something like that. But unfortunately, you will pay the price of having a lower NAD plus and less renewal. And it's just, I think it's important to give people the information that they can make their choice.
Yeah. I do want you maybe to touch on, because I don't know how much we touched on, and I think it's an interesting subject. Can you touch on the PLOS1 study on UV radiation and NAD?
Yes. Yeah. So let's not overlook the sun protection as NAD plus strategy. So as you mentioned, there was a study in 2015 that showed nicotinamide reduced UV-induced DNA damage by 20 to 25% within 4 hours. So combining UV avoidance, and I know a lot of biohackers are listening to us and they're going to be like, what do you mean? Sun is a friend, and sun is a friend. But just choose wisely, okay, when to expose your skin to the sun. If you are doing all the strategies we talked about this episode to boost your NAD plus, so you then have multiple effects. So you have less damage from direct UV exposure on your skin, which will actually deplete your NAD plus, because there will be need repair to happen, and you pay for it with NAD plus. And you also get it more NAD plus through all of the strategies we talked about, be it topical skincare, be it fasting, be it sleep, be it exercise. Then you're just, you're multiplying your bank of NAD plus.
Yeah, I would even add one more thing to it. There's a study out of Yonsei in Korea. I probably have talked about this study before, and now I can't remember. It's 2009 or 2013. Out of the University of Seoul, Yonsei, Korea, that looked at exposure to red light therapy before going out to the sun.
Yeah, we talked about it.
Yeah, and that is also, again, like that mitochondrial optimization, and there's less UV damage after you've done that. And yes, so definitely that's one way to look at, what do we do? Okay, we want to do, I have this very nice a son of one of our first, do you remember Todd from Indiana that has like a landscaping company? Well, like one of our first, shout out to Todd Rostron, one of our first clients ever.
Oh, so I probably just don't know his occupation. Okay.
But his son reached out. He's like, hey, I'm going to be in Florida. I want to see you guys. Great. Fantastic. Come on over. He's like, I'm going to be at the beach. I'm going to do like sun maxing. And I'm going to come to you the day after. First of all, the guy lives in Indiana, give him some sun. However, I respect the fact that you want to use all of the tools for wellness. And I think we do need to do like a deep dive on, our best approaches for interaction with the sun. But here's a few things. You are depleting NAD locally when you're exposed to UV. So ask yourself, like, where do you want that UV depletion to happen? You
mean NAD plus depletion?
NAD depletion, yes.
You said UV depletion.
Sorry, yeah. The second thing is this, there was a reason people were sunning their behinds, right? Why is that? It's because they're the widest. You make more, vitamin D, etc. there. So choose areas that are not exposed normally to the sun. They're actually going to synthesize more of the good things. And anyway, you're not getting enough sun there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a kind of constant strategy that it's a good thing. It's a good reminder that, guys, your face, your hands, your arms, your necks, they're always exposed, so it's a better idea to expose to the sun the areas that are not normally exposed.
But I love what you said about kind of this sunscreen as the savings account.
Yeah.
of NAD. I love that reframe again, the framing. One more thing is thermal exposure.
Yeah.
So,
the contrast therapy.
Contrast, thermal stress, sauna, cold plunges. You do both. I do both. Our cold plunge is broken, but technically
I know,
we do
that's
both.
why I had the face. I was like, do we?
Do we? We need to get a new one.
Yeah.
If you have any, by the way, if anyone has suggestion for their favorite
Cold
fill in the
plunge.
blank,
yeah, please let us know. We're currently relying on Equinox amenities, and we love Equinox, but the sauna is not as hot as we would have had it if it was at our home. I understand. We also live in the area with a lot of elderly people. They have to protect themselves. They don't want anyone to pass out in the sauna, so I get it. And the cold shower that they have instead of the plunge is it's an option.
It's a nice story. Cool story, bro.
But but we are collecting referrals, references on your favorite saunas and cold plunges, because we've had a couple that broke. So we're trying to find a reliable partner in our contrast therapy at home.
Yes. So the first thing I would say, so we're talking about contrast therapy, or just like temperature. As it relates to what we're talking about now. Super interesting subject. I mentioned before, because I don't want us to actually get to circadian rhythm here that much. So I'll just like kind of close the loop on what I said before. Your master regulator for circadian rhythm is temperature, or one of the master regulators together with light. That's why people, you have companies like 8 Sleep that cool you down when you go to sleep. But we're going to cap it at that. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Both, whole body, cellular, cold and heat are important to control your circadian rhythm. But I do want, if you can, for you to like kind of dive a little bit deeper into the mechanisms of how temperature communicates directly with skin longevity.
Yes. So high temperatures, the ones that you get to in saunas, activate heat shock proteins that interact with SIRT1 pathways. And then cold exposure triggers norepinephrine, which drives...
By the way, first time I heard about it, I was shocked.
Because it's shock protein, which drives... we have, again, activation of SIRT1 gene, which is the repair gene, through shock proteins when you're exposed to very high temperatures in sauna. And then when you're in a cold plunge, norepinephrine drives mitochondrial biogenesis through regulation of certain cascades. And both of those conditions, both of those practices, create conditions where NAD+ is used more efficiently and replenished more vigorously. So by performing contrast therapy, you through the pathways I mentioned above, you stimulate natural production of more NAD+ and use of it. And then, as you can see, there is a pattern here, like there. Basically, if you do indeed take care of yourself, and have you exercise, okay, and you fast, and you sleep well, you optimize your sleep and the windows and the times, and you do contrast therapy, you can maybe save on some very expensive NAD+ injections and have them produced naturally.
Yeah.
Speaking of injections and supplements, do you want to talk about that?
For sure. I just want to say, the minimum for what we talked about with cold exposure, it's not crazy. I mean, do I go crazy? I do. But you don't need to. If you are at 170, 15 minutes, cold exposure, like 2 minutes in an ice bath, below 50 degrees.
So
3-4 times a week.
Sauna for 15 minutes at 170, and then even just 2 to 3 minutes of cold exposure 3 to 4 times a week.
Yeah,
and you'll boost your natural NAD+ production.
Exactly. Especially, here's the thing: most of the things that we're talking about were done more or less in isolation. I mean, the people,
Yeah,
those...
yeah, they didn't mention that. Yeah, all of those studies, they had them to do it one thing at a time.
Yeah, I think the only thing, and that's there was a shout out to Morosco Forge, Tom Seeger. They had they have an annual kind of like a conference for I don't know how they call it, like for cold plunging, for I don't know if they call it like a temperature regulation conference or whatever. But they did analyze, they do like a meta analysis of the sauna life extension studies, the ones that were like for 20 years in Scandinavia, etc. And they're like, hey guys, Finland. Yeah, exactly. And they're like, hey guys, how come no one realizes that, yes, they did sauna, but they after that they did cold exposure? Like, no one talks about that. I think that's the only one that we can't say was an extreme isolation. But other things weren't tracked, right? Their exercise patterns weren't tracked. Sleep definitely wasn't tracked. Sunscreen, even screen time, right? Like, these were all isolation type studies. So when we stack all of those together, things really add up very nicely. So you don't need to go crazy in any one of those to get amazing benefits if you do indeed stack all of them together. And it's much easier to do 50% effort and stack things together than like 90% effort on one modality.
Yeah, I love that. No, I love that.
Yeah. Especially if you use, also topical NAD and stuff like that, you're really, you're really hitting it. Your cells are going to be swimming in NAD. Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, I would love for you to walk our listeners briefly through how they could support, their topical, how to get the NAD plus directly into the skin. And I will just say that all of these ways of boosting NAD plus we just talked about, they're all amazing. But unfortunately, after a certain age, especially for women, the body stops allocating NAD plus for your beauty, basically representation, and that would be your hair, your nails, and of course your skin. So if you're in perimenopause or menopause, you could be doing HIIT sessions, and you could be doing the contrast therapy, and you could be fasting, you could do a lot of things, and you will boost NAD plus, but it will not, your body will prioritize it for the liver, for the brain. So if you want to give your skin cells the ability to get sufficient NAD plus so they can go about their daily functions better, the only way to do it is topically.
Yeah. So I would go, I think, you had a very good post recently on Instagram, but I'll go back to like treating the mitochondria in the best way, and I'll make some sense
about... What post are you referring to?
The one the one about the, one pathway is this and that, 5 pathways or that. But basically, I'm going to go through NAD specifically, and then maybe other ingredients that I believe are key in order to then kind of interact with NAD, with high levels of NAD in the skin. Because we did launch, we researched NAD in the skin since 2017. We launched First Care 2020. And we found out the beginning of the company, even in research before the product was out, we found out that in isolation, we either saw incredible results, even with you on your dermatitis, but mainly with older people that had a lot of things, that their skin was really,
starved of NAD.
But there was also a lot of signal for repair day in, day out, right? And we saw crazy results. In people 35, 40, going through perimenopause, things like that, the problems were that the signaling and the amplification of signals, which I'm going to talk about in a second, that was one of the things that were really shutting down in their cells, in their skin. And then, even if we just increased NAD alone in isolation, it wasn't enough to create the results they were looking for. Or, if they were to use it for 15 years, their skin would have been much better than it would have without it. But that lady or gentleman wanted results in like a month or two, right? Or even, to look better for a wedding that's 6 months.
You know what comes to my mind? That you always say in that the body doesn't know that wrinkle is a problem.
Yes.
So when somebody started using our topical NAD formulation at the time, right? They, they're getting that NAD, and but the body did not funnel it to repair the wrinkle. It funneled it to other things that skin cells still need to operate well.
So let's talk about NAD specifically. I'm gonna, first of all, let's address niacinamide. So niacinamide basically is the kind of a waste material in the NAD usage kind of life cycle. And the problem is that if we're going to add more and more and more niacinamide, we're basically adding more homework for the body as far as what the body needs to create NAD out of. And that's it's a long process. So it's a process that the body, it takes a while for the body to do that. But there are things that we mentioned in AMPK. We have these different enzymes, these different proteins that are in charge of taking those waste materials and reassembling NAD. And when enzymes do it, there is a limit to that. There is fatigue, etc. Okay, it's not a perfect process, and it can be harmful if you do it chronically over time. And we've done some. We've had some information about it in the past, but niacinamide is very difficult within those parameters. So the reason that NAD precursors like NMN and NR, mainly NMN, NR is more like in your in organs like liver and things like that. We found NMN to be more effective, is that they have like a plug and play mechanism, right? They hang out outside the cell. They don't need to wait in line for the party, right? They arrive to the VIP. What's it called? The VIP. It shows you I haven't been to a club in 15 years. They arrive to the VIP entrance to the club. They get in immediately. They hand them a drink at the entrance, and they go party. Right? Did I say it correct? That's what happens in clubs?
I don't know why you asking me. It's not like I go clubbing every day.
Yeah, but you have friends that do. Anyway, bottom line.
I don't know. So what entrance did you arrive? Did they give you champagne when you arrived?
Listen.
How is it to be wild and free and young?
I have a feeling you never waited in line for a club, okay? Anyway.
No, that's true.
That's NAD precursors. We're glazing on. I want to make sure I provide this information in a very digestible way. So we're glazing over what are the pathways or anything like that. But these are plug and play easy mechanisms. The body doesn't need to expend a lot of energy to do to convert NMN to skincare, to NAD. So I'm going to go quickly about what we want to see in a perfect mechanism of raising NAD levels. We want to have a precursor that has a very, very specific delivery system. I think that's you had a little segment where you said what's needed to happen in that bilayer of an NAD molecule to get it, or an NMN molecule to get it really deep into the skin. We're going to have more information about it on the website soon. We're running some studies on penetration, but for now, it's very basically the rule is your skin barrier needs to recognize that it's something that it wants to pull into the skin. It needs to be nano-sized, and then it needs to be able to be opened up very quickly when it gets to where we want it to get in the cells and kind of used. But that's not the end of the story. Your body basically recycles more than 2 grams of NAD a day, which is more than you can supplement. High supplementation doses are a gram. A 4-hour IV, NAD IV is 750 milligrams, right? So it's a lot. Your body recycles a lot. we can help. You mentioned NAMPT, that recycling mechanism. We can help that. So there is a very good, it's called Rejuvenade or Rejuvenade, we call it, which is a very cool extract that is extracted from sunflower seeds that boosts NAMPT. We mentioned the peptide, it's called 5-amino-1-MQ, that most people do it as a pill. It's much safer than injectable. It's very expensive, but that's something that can be used orally to increase the if you don't want to do a topical, like what we have in NAD Apex, that would allow people to recycle more NAD. If you want to do the pill form, $300 to $400 a month of 5-amino-1-MQ peptide. And what we are looking at is a really cool new precursor. Is called MN20, which is a cousin of niacin, which also it's just another traveling a different highway, getting to NAD in a different highway, way more slow released, way more complex, like simple carbohydrates and complex carbohydrates. So this is a really cool new precursor we have in blue peptide spray, and we're going to introduce it in more products as time goes on. We definitely are looking into innovations in the field, but that's what we found currently to be the pinnacle, the golden standard of NAD maintenance in the skin. But I do want you to, maybe as to close this, I do want you to talk about, more of the bigger picture. You mentioned those 5 mechanisms, those 5 pathways in the mitochondria. And I want you to focus on ingredients that would allow us to reap the benefits of NAD.
Yeah, totally.
Of cells swimming in NAD, as I call them. So they're swimming. What are we doing with it now? What are the ingredients that really allow us to take our skin to that really optimal level because we've taken care of our NAD?
Yeah.
So maybe we should start with that. That's a mitochondrial pathway. Like increasing NAD is one of the 5 mitochondrial pathways, right?
Yes. And that we do that with NAD plus Apex, which we talked a lot about, what it is and what's inside of it. And that's that fuel that your skin cells need, right?
And you can find it in all the youth products.
You can find it in all of youth line products. You can find it in Ladder. You can find it in methylene blue spray, which is called blue peptide spray. And speaking of methylene blue, that is also very complementary to NAD plus boosting. That actually upgrades the engine itself, like the output of mitochondria, and how much NAD plus boosting you get out of it.
Or how much ATP it kind of creates, right?
How much ATP, really, it creates. That would be a better way to say it. Then what else? We have fermented resveratrol that basically...
maybe first, maybe I'll direct you just so it'll make sense to people. I think let's talk about, we did mention mitophagy. Where mitophagy is a part of autophagy. Autophagy is a more correct term to call it because mitophagy is a part of it. So how do you...
So mitophagy is a recycle of old and dysfunctional mitochondria. And the ingredient that we chose to use to stimulate that will be spermidine.
Yes, correct. Okay, great.
So in our formulas, we have spermidine, which... is a full spectrum spermidine, and it really helps you to remove the waste material.
And funny enough, it mimics fasting. We talked a lot about fasting. That is where this comes from, right?
Yes.
Okay, so we cleared out old mitochondria. Now what is it just dead space? There's just more. No. What do we build real estate there? We put it on Zillow. What are we doing?
We need to create new mitochondria, and to do that, we could use ergothioneine. Well, we use ergothioneine in our formulas, and the reason we chose ergothioneine is it's the only antioxidant have the direct transporter into mitochondria.
Yeah, I like to call it as like a mitochondrial antioxidant.
Yes.
And it's really cool. It really triggers. It's really two really cool things about ergothioneine. First is that transporter. I think it's called OCTN1 or something like that. OCT1. One cool thing. Immediately goes into your mitochondria, triggers biogenesis. But the second thing is it's more bioavailable through your skin than through your gut.
Ergotamine.
Yeah. So it's really cool. A lot of like data around bioavailability, wonderful studies. Okay, so we've built those new mitochondria. We've upgraded the engine. We topped
the NAD
fuel
plus.
tank.
Like, yeah, we have more of it.
More of it. We cleared out old engines. We built new ones. Then, how do we use all of that?
Yes, and that's where the fermented resveratrol comes in. So that is what tells your body to activate SIRT1, which we talked about, those longevity genes, youth genes, that they will activate repair processes, and they need NAD plus to function. So you feed your SIRT1 enzymes with NAD plus, and then they go and do that important work.
Yeah, and we mentioned a little bit also other enzymes like PARPs, which repair UV damage. Really cool. Really cool things. I'll give two honorable mentions here because we did mention again the vampire exosomes. So exosomes, I think, are the next layer, which is like, okay, now we have all of that. Our genes are dialed in, everything. Now we need to base some signaling for bigger things than mitochondria. Basically, how do we now signal like complete cellular renewal, cellular overhaul? How do we build the infrastructure? Or we build the infrastructure. Now we need to build now it's time for Zillow. And I think the third layer is harnessing other technologies. Maybe we'll do other episodes about that. This is not for today's episode, but harnessing other technologies like red light therapy or microneedling or things like that to stimulate remodeling. Probably the most.
But all of these processes, be it properly getting all the benefits out of red light therapy or microneedling or whatever else we'll share, all of that is only possible if you have enough NAD plus in the bank.
Yes, exactly. But it is also the best way to get the most out of your quest to increase NAD. So I would say where you should start as far as like that third layer is which is the amplification layer. Okay, we're causing remodeling, we're creating healthy tissue. Now how do you kind of no pun intended, poke it or prod it into the right direction? Okay, we want to, wrinkles are the issue here. We want to repair wrinkles, etc. Best way, I think, red light therapy and ladder, which we created, LADR, is really the way to kind of take care of that third layer. But there you have it, I think. I think this is a great podcast as far as NAD.
Yeah, I think for all of those that are asking why NAD, how NAD, when NAD, hopefully the part 1 and part 2 answers all of the questions. We probably will put some kind of guide together. What do you think? Yes?
The guide has already been written, my dear.
Okay. So directly from Amitai Eshel, you will get the guide in the show notes. Just gotta click the show notes, put your email, get the guide.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we had the honor of being in your ear for the last hour or so. This is Anastasia Khojaeva, Amitai Eshel.
Thank you, guys.
Like, subscribe, and we'll see you here next time.
See you. Bye.